Good morning, church family. Today we are continuing through our deep dive daily Devo series, and we're currently in the book of Exodus following the story of Moses. In yesterday's passage, what we saw is Moses continuing to present his excuses to God's call. God's calling him to be a messenger to bring the people of Israel out of Egypt, and Moses keeps presenting his excuses. And time again throughout these excuses, God kept giving a response, kept presenting his power, the ways he would use Moses, despite what Moses said he couldn't do. And now what we're seeing is, we're beginning to see Moses' response. Today's passage is Moses begins to head towards Egypt. He begins to pack up his family and leave. And it's some stories along the way of Moses beginning to show obedience. And so today I'm just going to reread 3 of the verses from our selected passage and just kind of unpack some things that stand out in these verses. And starting in verse 18 of Exodus chapter 4, then Moses departed and returned to Jethro, his father-in-law, and said to him, "Please let me go, that I might return to my brethren who are in Egypt and see if they are still alive." And Jethro said to Moses, "Go in peace." Now the Lord said to Moses in Midian, "Go back to Egypt, for all the men who were seeking your life are dead." So Moses took his wife and his sons and mounted them on a donkey and returned to the land of Egypt. Moses also took the staff of God in his hand. So first what we see is he asks permission from his father-in-law. He's like, "Hey, I'm about to take your daughter, take your grandkids and go back to Egypt." And he gets approval. And then we see kind of a restatement of God's orders to him. It's go back to Egypt, for all the men who are seeking your life are dead. So he's told to go back to Egypt. And what's cool about this part is that added statement that can be easy to overlook is all those who sought you are dead. And so what this is saying is, we know Moses had killed an Egyptian. He saw this Egyptian mistreating the Israelites, his people, and he responded by murdering this Egyptian. And as a result, the Pharaoh at the time and other people probably in leadership were seeking to take Moses' life, and that's what led him to flee to Midian. And so what we're seeing now in this obedient call is also God kind of assuring him, hey, it's time for you to come back to obey my purpose for you, but also you're going to be safe. I'm going to protect you. The people that were seeking you, they're no more. The Pharaoh that you're going to have to confront is a different Pharaoh. That Pharaoh who knew of your murder, he's dead. And the people that were part of his leadership, they're gone and they're past. It's a new leadership. They're not going to worry about your past crime. You're going to be safe to go forward and do my mission. And so it's this simple assurance God is giving Moses of, hey, it's time for you to go and obey me, and know that I'll protect you, know that I'll keep you safe in this obedience. And then next, another thing we see that I think is a thing to be accredited to Moses is then he doesn't just say, I'm going to go do this task and then I'm going to move back to Midian. I'm just going to maybe get it done. No, he packs up his whole family and he goes. He's part of his obedience is not just carrying out the task, but returning to the people of Israel, returning to God's people once again, obediently rejoining God's people of Israel, not just coming to save them and then leaving again, but coming to save them and being a leader to them. And then finally, the most important, the coolest detail is the very end of verse 21, or verse 20 mentions that he made sure when he left, he took God's staff. And so this is the staff that at the end of Moses presenting all his excuses and God continually telling him the miracles he would do, this is the staff that God said, take this staff and with it perform these miracles. And what's so important about this is in Israelite culture, the staff was a really valuable thing. It was a thing that was often an identifying factor for a person. It was a symbol of their character, of their strength, their power. It was oftentimes used to identify them. These staffs were considered to be one of the most prized possessions, and many of the staffs had like personal carvings and designs to set them apart. It would be this identifying factor of a person, this protective thing that was used for self-defense as well. It had so many roles packed in it, roles of being an identifying factor, a protector, this item that was vital to the life of an Israelite man. And what's so cool then is by taking God's staff, The power he's depending upon is God's. The person, the identity he's depending upon is God's. He's not carrying his own staff. He's not carrying his own strength into this task. He's not charging forward saying, hey, in my ability, with my staff, with what I know, with my power. Instead, he's taking God's staff. He's taking God's strength, God's power, God's identity for him. And that's what's so important, is in this passage what we're seeing is the beginning of a turn of Moses being defined by his excuses and his mistakes, his identity and his strength and its complete inability, to instead be defined by God's strength and God's power. And this is all kind of visualized through the taking of this staff to trust God in the task set before him. So church family, I pray that we learn from that practice of how can I, in my life, take on God's staff and trust that he will identify me, that my identity, my worth, my value is in him. And in the same light, my strength, my ability is in him as well. So church family, I hope you have a great day, and I pray that we rest in God's strength in all that we do.